America's Loose Cannon.
Welcome, everybody, to the Talk Radio program. Glad you guys are here with us today. My name is Ray Phoenix. My friends call me Talk, and I hail from the amazing, incredible state of Florida, where none of us have our own values. We're just codependent on Ron DeSantis for his, as I believe Steve Deace believes about us. Again, my name is Ray. Glad you're here. Today, I'm going to be talking about how 100% of those who lean to the right that voted for Donald Trump are going to come to regret that vote. All of you that lean to the right, I promise you it's coming. And I don't mean most of you. I don't mean the majority of you. I don't mean the overwhelming percentage of you that voted for him. I mean 100% of you are going to come to regret your vote. I'm going to prove that to you today. I'm going to show you how the executive orders he issued yesterday were entirely, completely, outrageously beyond illegal. We're going to chat about that as I give you some of the information about how and why what he did is so critical, because you guys have been focusing on what he did yesterday. I don't want to talk about what he did other than just to enumerate some things. I want to talk about how he did it. And that's exactly where he wants you focused. He's got the left hand on what he's doing. So everybody goes, oh, that was good, that was good, that was good. And his right hand on the buttons of how he's doing it. So we're going to talk about how today, and that's the sort of the critical infrastructure of the entire podcast today. That's exactly where he wants you focused when he's doing that sleight of hand, with the one hand going one way and the other going the other, and you have no idea. So don't look at the man behind the curtain. Just pay attention to the things that the man's doing, and you're going to absolutely love him. There was a flurry of executive orders yesterday, just an absolute flurry of them. But we only need to cover two of them today to really understand the depth of the problem. We're just going to talk about the TikTok order, and we're going to talk about birthright citizenship. And just understand that what I'm giving you today applies to all of them. Like everything, there was a few that were absolutely excellent. I'll give you one example so you don't think I'm just loaded with TDS. By the way, a video on what TDS actually is forthcoming very soon, and I think you're going to be quite shocked at what it actually is. But so that you don't think I have TDS, even though I can't convince any of you that I don't, all of you just think I hate Donald Trump, and that's fine, I don't. But many of you think that I do. I can give him credit where credit is due. Let me tell you, those J6 orders yesterday, commuting a few of them, but pardoning the overwhelming majority of them, that needed to happen. That was brilliant. And for that, I thank President Trump. Okay, I want to be very clear here. Has there ever been good things Trump has done? Yes. It's just, I happen to know through empirical evidence, the bad so far outweighs the good, it's not worth having him as a president. That said, let's not at least give him credit where credit is due. And I do it unreservedly on that issue with the J6, what I consider to be political prisoners, political hostages, right? These are the people who essentially gave their lives for Donald Trump. The Bible talks about that there's no greater gift someone can give you than their own life, right? And they gave their lives for Trump. And I have been, for the last 4 years, entirely disappointed and aggravated at Trump, who has billions and billions and billions of dollars, at least so he claims, and hasn't lifted a finger in terms of money to help them. He didn't help Jenna Ellis. He didn't help the J6ers. He helped no one, not Rudy Giuliani. Everybody, he demands loyalty, but then doesn't provide it to you when you need it most. Those have been my grievances. But that said, this was great what he did for the J6ers yesterday. That was absolutely incredible. And once again, let me just be on the record for saying this. Donald Trump, Mr. President, thank you for doing that. That was absolutely necessary and the right thing to do. So let's get back to what we need to talk about today. Let's talk about TikTok and the birthright citizenship. Let me go back through first to go through the TikTok law with you. It's divided into two parts to understand the problem with what he did yesterday across all these orders. Like I said, we could just use TikTok and the birthright citizenship thing as examples. But you got to understand a little bit about the TikTok law to understand exactly why there's a problem. So what happened was Congress passed this just, huge bill with lots of different acts in it. And two of the acts were in regards essentially to TikTok. One was called Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, or PFACA, I guess, something like that. Others have called it the prohibition of foreign adversary-controlled applications, or POFACA, I guess. That sounds very close to a curse word, so I'm trying to be very careful. I could hear Snoop Dogg using that. I really could. So let me read through just a little bit of the text, but understand the way these two things divide out. Part one, this first act, is to prohibit apps that are owned by foreign adversaries. And then the second part is to prohibit what they can do with apps in case they happen to own them, even though they were just prohibited from owning them. Anyway, so let's read through the text. I'm not going deep into it, just going to do a brief overview of what it says. It shall be unlawful for any entity to distribute, maintain, or update, or enable the distribution, maintenance, or updating of a foreign adversary-controlled application by carrying out, within the land or maritime borders of the United States, any of the following. So it starts with this idea that if you are a foreign adversary, you cannot have the controlling interest in an app if you meet the following, to do these following things. A is this: providing such services to distribute, maintain, or update such foreign adversary-controlled application, including any source code of such application by means of marketplace, including, I'm going very quickly through this and I'll explain in a moment, including an online mobile application store through which users within the land or maritime borders of the United States may access, maintain, or update such selection. Okay, so the first piece just basically says, remember I told you the section 1 is about, or the first part is about, I'm saying that wrong, the first act. The first act in this particular bill that relates to TikTok has to do with you can't have an app and you can't be on the App Store, and app stores need to get you out of their App Store if you meet the criteria. So all that gobbledygook just means that. Can't have an app here and the app stores have to kick you out. All right, letter B says this. If you're providing internet hosting services or enable the distribution, maintenance, or updating of such foreign adversary-controlled application for users within the land or maritime borders of the United States. So part 1, letter A, had to do with those who create the apps. Letter B right there is what I told you just a moment ago, those who host the apps, whether it's the foreign adversary or a store like the App Store from Apple or the Google Play Store or whatever else. So part 1 deals of the TikTok ban. It's really not about TikTok necessarily, though that's obviously the target. It's not necessarily about TikTok. It's about any app controlled or owned by a foreign country. Foreign adversary, not foreign country. Someone that's on a list of adversaries for the United States. All right. That's what Act 1 does. Now let's talk about Act 2, which is called Protecting Americans' Data from Foreign Adversaries Act, which I believe abbreviates to PADFA. Okay, here's what it says. Prohibition. It shall be, and I'm going to do the same thing here that I did last time. I'm going to read the gobbledygook, and then I'm going to explain it for you. It shall be unlawful for a data broker to sell, license, rent, trade, transfer, release, disclose, provide access to, or otherwise make available personally identifiable sensitive data of a United States individual to. So it starts with this. It starts with, you're not allowed, if you're a foreign adversary, you are not allowed to sell, license, rent, trade. You can't give our data to anybody else, okay? No matter who you are, you can't do this, okay? It is unlawful for a data broker. Now, here's what's interesting. The first act was about foreign adversaries. This one affects foreign adversaries, but is not about foreign adversaries. This is about any data broker. Now, what does it mean to be a data broker, right? A data broker is anyone that captures your info. I promise you would be horrified if you knew the recordings Apple has of you having sex with your partners because of Siri. Horrified about the Alexa recordings that are being stored of you when you're humping your, going at it like crazy in the corner of your house you think no one can hear, and Alexa's just recording that and sending it to Amazon. Both have been caught doing this, by the way, so I'm not speaking out of turn here. This isn't conjecture. This isn't the possibility of this. They have done this, been caught doing it, and have been, I don't remember if they were fined for it, but it's definitely out in the open now. So that said, you would be shocked at the amount of data they have. I mean, I use those as examples to just kind of pre-shock you. They know absolutely everything about your life, right? Now imagine Somebody that's a foreign adversary can get a hold of that because if they own one of the companies that has access to the data, they know everything about you. Now, beyond that, we come back to the idea of data brokers. So this is why this isn't particularly necessarily about the adversary. This is about the people in the United States that broker data. A data broker is someone who sells your data to other people. And we all know the old adage, and I'm trying to remember it the right way, that the reason why Google doesn't cost you anything, what is the adage? It's escaping me. Is because you're the product, right? The reason why Google doesn't sell anything is because you're the product. They do sell something. They sell you. They sell access to the data of who you are, where you are, what you do, when you do it, and Apple does the same thing. I don't want to have a debate right now about whether that's a good thing, a bad thing, whether they should or shouldn't be able to do it. They're data brokers, and for the purposes of our example, I want you to understand what that means. Okay. So, who they cannot sell it to, let's go back to the text of the law. They can't sell it to any foreign adversary or country or any entity that's controlled by a foreign adversary. So now we are back at the idea of the foreign adversaries, okay? This is then what they cannot sell and more specifically can't have, okay? Take a listen. They can't sell or even have your precise geolocation information, whether that be past or present. They can't have any of your sensitive data, social security number, passport number, driver's license number, etc., all that type of stuff, or any information that describes or reveals the past, present, or future physical health, mental health, disability, diagnosis, or healthcare condition or treatment of an individual. Does any of that sound like anything you want to argue with? Because it doesn't to me. This doesn't sound like something to me like oh no, I think China should have all that info. Of course, we all agree on this, right? Which is why the claims of those that say this is about censoring free speech. No, it's not. This is not about censoring free speech. And here's how we know. They were not told they had to shut down. They were told you need to sell. Now, whether you agree with this or not, I'm just addressing this from the angle of, is it about censorship? No, because they were told that you are connected to an entire country that hates us, that wants us destroyed, and you're giving them our data for our citizens. We're talking healthcare data, driver's license, social security number, where we live, where we've been, a history of it, a projection of where we're going to be in the future, everything. They know every move we make. Google knows everything you do and can predict what you're going to do today before you even get out of bed. Imagine China can do that now. Can you imagine the type of attack they can launch on us, knowing exactly where everyone is, when they're going? They can predict the most powerful and potent times to attack. They can pick the most vulnerable places. They know everything about us, and they can launch all kinds of attacks like that with this data. Of course, this is a good thing. Of course, it is a good thing not to have foreign adversaries knowing this type of data. So this is not about censorship because they said, look, we're not trying to shut you down, TikTok. We're trying to get you owned by people that are allied with us, i.e. our own citizens you can sell to one of us. Now, we can have the argument about whether they can force a sale or not. It's a separate argument. But I believe they can. They wrote a law for it, and we put them in Congress to make these types of laws. But that said, they made the law. That is the law. And they said, as long as you sell to somebody else that we approve of, you can continue doing everything as you've been doing. You don't have to change your content. You don't have to change the data that you collect. You don't have to change your algorithms. You don't have to monitor any speech for us. You don't have to give us any of the data that you're collecting. You don't have to stop posting certain things and allow others. You don't have none of that. People took this, the broad brush propaganda stroke that TikTok and its users took, which was, you're just trying to censor us. No. That's not. Stop making me defend people in Washington. This was the right thing to do. Here's why it's a fallacy, though. It's not a fallacy, this whole law, because they're trying to censor you. This is a fallacy because it only requires them to divest themselves or sell. They can. Let me reverse the way I was going to say that. They can only own a maximum of 20% of the company. Well, if you're trying to stop someone that controls 20% of a company that makes billions and billions of dollars every year, you don't think they're going to have access to the data still? So if you're going to attack the law, attack it from what is actually taking place, not the fallacy that the overdramatic people who use the app are saying, oh my God, gosh, you're trying to stop us from making a living. You're trying to censor our speech because you don't like Chinese people. That's not what's going on. This is about preventing your data from falling into the wrong hands as the law is written. And it's right, except that they can still own 20% of the company, which literally invalidates the entire law. That's where the problem in that law is. It's not in all the other stuff like the free speech argument and the censorship. It's not there. It's in the fact that the law doesn't actually solve the problem. Surprise, surprise, Washington made a law to fix something that they broke that still doesn't fix it. But either way, it's not about censorship. It's about protecting your data. It's about protecting your privacy. It's about protecting everything about you from foreign adversaries learning that stuff and launching attacks against us. All right, so now that we've established that, and you understand the difference now that it's not about censorship, it's about ownership, that was where the problem is that they can still own a large chunk of it. Now let's talk about what Trump did yesterday. So the way this worked was after the law went into effect, they had 6 months to sell, and that was it. And again, I don't want to have the argument right now whether you think the government has that power. We can have that argument. I'm fine to talk about it. But let's just assume for a moment that the law is not overstepping. And if it is, they can take it to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, they did, and the Supreme Court upheld it, okay? So we can't even, we can have the argument, but it's not going anywhere. So the law, according to the Supreme Court, is valid and enforceable. And I agree with the Supreme Court on this one, all right? So the law said they had 6 months to take care of this, and they have to have it done by January 19th. And if they don't have it sold by the 19th, they got to shut down. The law then built in an exception for Trump. Well, not for Trump, for any president. We knew it was going to be Trump by the time all this stuff went down the last week. So the law built in an exception that the president of the United States could then take advantage of, which the Republicans are now trying to tell you this is what he did. That is propaganda. That is a lie, and it is not true. That's not what Trump did. First, as a quick rabbit hole, why did Trump do this? Because it's legacy building. Trump's the one that started the idea of banning TikTok, okay? He was one that had been telling us for 8 years, this, or however long he's been saying it, that this app is a problem and it's giving data to our foreign adversaries, and he's been right about that. And then as soon as it happens and there's an uproar, Trump, in typical Trump fashion, when he thinks it's going to hurt his legacy or people aren't going to like him because he's got to be liked, he changes his mind. So he's legacy building, and that's all that is. He wants the youth to love him, and now the youth are very confused and kind of leaning in his direction because of what he did with TikTok. And he wants millions of adult Americans who make their living off of TikTok to be able to want to love him as well. So it's legacy building. There's no other reason that he did this. He used the free speech argument, but it's all a lie. I've just proven to you it has nothing to do with free speech. It has nothing to do with censorship. It has to do with making Americans unsafe. And by the way, the other reason why the law is ridiculous, besides the fact that they can still own 20%, is because there's plenty of other apps in the App Store that aren't getting this treatment that are from China. Matter of fact, I forget, was it called Red or something like that? There's another one in the App Store that everybody just kind of meandered over to when TikTok went down. So the first thing that happened was TikTok broke the law. As soon as they heard that Trump was likely to do this on Saturday, they pulled their servers back up on Sunday morning, and it's illegal. They could not do that until Trump wrote the order, but they just went ahead and did it. They just broke the law and suffered no penalty for doing it because they couldn't do it until Trump issued the extension. So let's talk about that extension. What does the law say that he can do? And this is where we run into the issue. So take a look at this. With respect to a foreign adversary-controlled application, i.e. TikTok, the president may grant a one-time extension of not more than 90 days. Let's stop there for a moment. Seems like he's allowed to do this, right? And that, my friends, is where the majority of people stop. At that, the president may grant a one-time 90-day extension. Ta-da! Hallelujah, he's allowed to do it. Not if you keep reading, which is what we're going to do right now. With respect to a foreign adversary-controlled application, the president may grant a one-time extension of not more than 90 days with respect to the data on which this subsection would otherwise apply to such application pursuant to paragraph 2. If, and this is where the thing is, he can grant the extension if the president certifies. Now, let me just very slowly walk you through the last few words. The president, in a paraphrase, the president may issue a one-time extension of up to 90 days, of no more than 90 days, so up to 90 days, if the president may do this, if, let's see if the if exists. If the president certifies that Congress, A, a path to executing a qualified divestiture has been identified with respect to such application, that's A. B, evidence of significant progress toward executing such qualified divestiture has been produced with respect to such application. And C, there are in place the relevant binding legal agreements to enable execution of such qualified divestiture during the period of such extension. So let me take the gobbledygook and break it down into much easier identifiable chunks. He may do this if, number one, there is a path. In other words, there is already an agreement that has been made between TikTok and somebody else to sell. Let's be very clear about something. The reason TikTok went dark the other day is because they have been adamant they are not going to sell. They haven't even started talks, which is their right. They don't have to. But they had two choices under the law. You can begin talks and sell your joint, or you can close it down. They chose to close it down. TikTok made the choice to not exist anymore. We're not going to exist if we can't own it. Now, I get that. There's things in my life I wouldn't want other people controlling that I create or whatever else. Okay, fine, but that's your choice. You have to live with what you choose. But he can only extend it if there's a qualified divestiture which has been identified, first of all, regarding that specific application. Second of all, you have to show progress toward executing a qualified divestiture. And you must produce the legal documentation. In other words, take it back and make it really, really simple. For Trump to issue an executive order extending the time for TikTok, what he must do is prove an agreement has been signed. Before he can issue the extension, the agreement has to already be signed. Otherwise, he can't issue the extension. Period. End of story. It basically has to be a done deal. The purpose of the extension is not to buy them more time to find a buyer, as he's been saying. It's to complete a deal with a buyer that they have already signed. Trump did none of that because they did none of that. And he did none of that because he knew he couldn't. So what does his order say? Does his order say he's granting them more time? Because that's what we were told. We were told before he issued the order, he's going to issue an extension. That's not what he did. He didn't issue a limited extension based on those things. He issued an unlimited extension on the basis that he's never going to enforce the law. Trump issued an executive order that states, my Justice Department is not going to enforce that law. Now, do you remember way long ago, way back, like 24 hours ago, when Biden was still president and you were pissed at him for picking and choosing which orders and which laws he would enforce? He was selectively picking what he would do and what he wouldn't do. Remember how we've been complaining about that for 4 years with the border? That he's selectively enforcing laws? And do you remember why we wanted the border to be enforced? Because foreign adversaries, be it Juana Maria that just want to pick vegetables, or ISIS, were invading our country and putting us at risk. Isn't that exactly what this law is about? I mean, I read it to you. It is clearly what it was about. You hated it. You hated it when Biden did it, but you hail it when Trump does it. And this takes us back to what I told you before, the two-handed thing with Trump, where on the one hand, he's doing the thing you want, and on the other, he's doing it in a way that he's not allowed to do it. But don't watch this hand, just this one. Look what I did. Look what I did. I did it for you. It was completely illegal, just as it was under Joe Biden, completely illegal. And I've already mentioned to you that when TikTok heard he was going to do something illegal, they decided to do something illegal and reinstate the service before they should have. Which brings us to birthright citizenship. Now understand, as we sort of tuck TikTok away into the back burner here, we're going to return to it to tie these two things together. Do you know what this little gem of an executive order says? Trump has said this in his order. The U.S. government will no longer recognize the citizenship of children born in the United States to immigrants who lack legal status. It also bars birthright citizenship for children born to people on temporary work, student, and tourist visas. The order reinterprets the words and the subject to the jurisdiction thereof words in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which grants citizenship to nearly all people born on U.S. soil, to exclude babies born by parents illegally here in the country. All of that gobbledygook to say this. Trump just decided he, not the Supreme Court, not judges, not people on the bench, not attorneys, and not you, and not Congress, not the Senate, not the House, no one but him now gets to interpret what law means. He is going to decide what it means. He reinterpreted the 14th Amendment and issued an edict. This is not an executive order. This is an edict. This is a king telling you how it's going to be. This is the exact opposite of what our government was set up for and how we were supposed to be. This is the exact opposite of what we are supposed to do in America. Don't you remember, like if you're a Gen Xer, I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill, and I don't become a law until it's put together by Congress completely, the House and the Senate, and I'm not a bill, and I'm not a law until the president signs me. He just, out of thin air, created a new law, or at the very least, modified a law. Donald Trump just modified the amendments to the Constitution. No constitutional convention, no judges, nobody. He just modified it. He just said, this is what it's going to be. He just decided his interpretation is the right one. A dude who has never had a law class, never been an attorney, never sat on a bench. And believe me, I have my own share of disdain for judges and lawyers and everything else. I'm not calling them saints, but at least needs to have the perfunctory idea that it goes through those channels before something like this changes. I showed you with TikTok that he just broke the law. Now I showed you with the birthright citizenship that he just modified the law. And this leads me to why I can say to you that every single right-wing person that voted for Trump, especially conservatives, will regret their vote. 100% of you. 100, yes, I'm saying 100% of you are going to come to regret your vote. Here's how. I want you to listen to something that was on Fox News this morning. And I'm purposely using Fox News, by the way, because I want you to hear it from your own side. I don't want to play CNN, who says similar things, by the way, or MSNBC or the other left-wing Trump haters. I want you to hear it from your own side. So they had a legal analyst on this morning who said this. Take a listen.
President, a pre-pardon that President Biden just set up for his family and for those who were on the January 6th committee.
Okay, hold on. Why am I going to the pardon thing when we're talking about this stuff? I'm going to the pardon thing because he's going to talk to you, or she's going to talk to you about presidential precedent, which everything she's about to tell you about what Joe Biden did with the pardons, which I think you and I are all on the same page with that. That was all garbage. It applies to this stuff that Trump did yesterday. Take a listen.
What has that done to the legal community? What does that do to the pardon process?
Well, it's given political license to both Donald Trump and every president thereafter to do the same. So presumptive pardons have never been tested in court. Now, I suspect that courts would probably defer to the president's pardon power, given that it is very broad and discretionary.
She says it has given political license to both Donald Trump and every president thereafter to do the same. This is why you're going to regret your vote. I promise you, you're going to regret it. Every president, now the precedent has been set. Every president can do this. A dude who is the president has now set a precedent that any other president can now just do. Any president now, because this was set, can just interpret law and go with it. Any president now can modify the Bill of Rights. So listen, I want you to imagine for just a moment. You've heard the left talking repeatedly about how the First Amendment's just too broad. The First Amendment just too much. There just needs to be some more protections for people against, what people can say. There's a hate speech. We can't have this kind of speech. And we all know on the right that's ridiculous. It's the very type of speech the Constitution was intended to protect, especially the First Amendment. It's exactly what people are supposed to be able to say. I want you to imagine for a moment, Democrat gets into office and says, hot darn, I am going to just say, you know what? It's time that we just, you know what, dude? Let's modify that First Amendment a little bit. And he just writes an executive order, and that's it. He just writes that executive order. Now, I could already hear the arguments of Trump people. Oh, no worry, Ray. He's just throwing everything against the wall, see what sticks. And this isn't going to stick. It was just it's just 4D chess. Trump's just, he's just moving pieces on the board. You just got to understand. He just pushes out and we'll just see what happens, blah, blah. Could you sound any more like a defense attorney who knows his client is guilty? I don't think so. Maybe that's what Trump is doing, but it doesn't matter. And I don't think that's what he's doing. I think he really is hoping he has this power and won't be challenged. Now, a bazillion lawsuits have already been filed on these orders. Thank God. So I can't believe I'm saying thank God ACLU is filing lawsuits, but I am, because they're starting to challenge whether he has the authority to do this. And if it had been Biden, they certainly wouldn't have filed these, more than likely. So they're going to set precedent for themselves once the Supreme Court rules on this stuff, which could be years. In the meantime, he's modifying all kinds of laws. But imagine for a moment that the left decides, a left-wing president wakes up one day and says, you know what? I'm just sick of this whole First Amendment thing. We need to modify this. And just modifies it. Imagine the outrage that would happen on the right. Imagine if they want to do that to the Second Amendment. Oh, wait a minute. There was a president that just used an executive order to modify the Second Amendment. That's already been, who was that? So long ago. Who was it that modified the Second Amendment? Oh, yeah. That was Donald Trump. Trump modified the Second Amendment by banning bump stocks. He wasn't allowed to do that legally. And it took years in the court system until it got to the Supreme Court, where it was finally overturned by the Supreme Court. Thank God. But what if they hadn't? What if Biden had gotten his wish and a Supreme Court justice, God forbid, on the right had died? He had installed someone who was a lefty, which we know he would have. And now the Supreme Court has a majority to the left. You think they're going to not keep that bump stock rule? You think they're not going to say, yeah, you know what, more gun control is better? He just modified the law and you guys voted for him again. It's going to happen. So no courts, no trials, no judicial decisions. He just decided bump stocks were illegal, the way he just decided the 14th Amendment works differently than courts have multiple times interpreted it to work. And by the way, that's the other thing. It's not simply that he just made a decision on an interpretation of law that hadn't been previously interpreted. It's been interpreted by the Supreme Court before. They went through this and made decisions on it. There are pieces of it that are still a little gray that need to go back through the Supreme Court, but it is very clear that the law of the United States right now is that if you are here and you have a kid, they are a citizen. I'm not saying I agree with it. I don't think that's how things should be, which is how so many of you justify what you do. Oh, you like the idea that someone could just cross the border, poof, pop out a baby, and that's a citizen now? Of course not. But you have to understand that how we do things is as important as what we are doing. That is the lesson Jesus gave us in the wilderness. This is what he was trying to say, how you get where you're going. The devil came and tempted him and said, hey, don't you want some bread? Have something. Make yourself something. And Jesus says, my food is to do the will of God. The final temptation of Christ was the big one. Jesus came here to save everybody. And Satan says, you know what? Why go to the cross? Why do that? Why? Why would you do that? I will give you everyone. Just bow down to me. Why didn't Christ do it? Set aside for a moment that it's sin and he's not going to sin. He didn't do it because how you get where you're going is as important as where you are going. And if you use the wrong path to get there, you'll never get where you're trying to go. It is critical that these things go down the correct paths. It is critical that they go through courts and trials and judicial decisions. But not with Trump. He just decided that that's how it's going to be. It is a job exclusively given to courts, and he just took it from them. So not only has he violated the law repeatedly with these executive orders, on top of that, he has now taken the Supreme Court's job from them and put it into the hands of the president. If stuff gets challenged, as many of you try to say, well, he's just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And he's a little bit naive and he doesn't know, so he just does what he thinks he can. You got excuse after excuse for him. If something were to go wrong and a Democrat takes control and this precedent has been set, and you've got to understand that once precedent has been set, that's how it works from now on. The Fox News people just told you that, so you know you can trust it, right? Because they don't ever lie or anything to people. Fox News analysts, the Fox News legal analysts told you this, that once a president does something with an executive order or a pardon, it becomes the way it is, unless it's challenged. This can't stand. It can't. And all of you need to support the idea that Trump's power of doing this needs to be stripped from him. He should not be allowed to do this. It's not okay. But here's where you will come to regret it, and it's something you will never admit. Because this is something that has never been done in American history, never been done by a president previously. You want to know why you're going to regret your vote for Trump? Because the Democratic president is going to do just what he did. Imagine for a moment what they will do with abortion if they can just rewrite law from the office of the president, or just make up a law about guns. I was there when the Tea Parties existed. I was there when we were fighting Obama, and the number one protest, besides the healthcare law, was his incredibly illegal use of executive orders. That was one of the main things. The main event was we were protesting the healthcare law. But right below that was his just unfettered use of executive orders illegally over and over and over and over. You used to understand this. And as soon as another president that is Democrat does exactly what he just did yesterday, you are going to whine your butts off. You used to understand when it was Obama. But when it happens again, and it will, under a Democrat, they're going to rewrite. He just gave them permission to rewrite the Constitution of the United States of America from the president's office with an executive order. You don't think Democrats are going to do this? You don't think that's going to happen? And when they do, you're going to whine about it. And you're going to suddenly remember, oh, this is a bad idea. Well, what happens when the Dems say to you, look, you may not like the way he's doing it, but these things need to happen? Well, then you're not going to like either. You're not going to like what they're doing or how they're doing it. If you don't stand up now to Donald Trump and tell him to stop doing what he's doing, if we don't stand up as a people and say, you can't do it this way, the Democrats are going to do it. And when you complain about what the Democrats are doing, you'll say things like, do you see what that a-hole in the office is doing right now, the a-hole in the White House? And I'll be like, yeah, I do. Yeah, and he's doing it because of what the last a-hole did that you didn't fight. Consuming and vacuuming power up into the office of the president, and you're doing nothing about it. So you'll be pissed one day when they do it, and you'll scream and you'll yell and you'll cry foul ball, and you'll think you're mad at the Democrat. But the truth is, when you do that, you're actually screaming at Donald Trump. You're actually showing regret for your vote of Donald Trump. Every one of you are going to complain about it when it's done from the other side. And you'll suddenly have clarity. Like all of a sudden it'll be like, well, they can't do that because the president can't rewrite the law. And I'll be like, yeah, I know. I told you that 4 years ago on the first day he was in office. You will come to regret your vote. Every single one of you within the sound of my voice. Every single one of you within the sound of my voice. So to all of my conservative counterparts all throughout America, you are never again allowed to complain that Democrats, when they do so, are using executive orders illegally. You have no right because you didn't stand up and you didn't speak against Trump when he did it. But make no mistake, you will absolutely, positively regret your vote for Donald Trump. You are going to scream and you're going to wail and you're going to gnash your teeth. And the irony is that you're so deceived, you won't even know that you're screaming and wailing against Donald Trump. See y'all next time.
Ray Phoenix, America's loose cannon.